very good morning, everyone. I'm Riya Nair, an ASTA volunteer at a brand new session of our Back to School webinar series focused on mental health and the pandemic. In this time of the pandemic, when there is so much uncertainty around, we've been faced with so many changes and challenges. Taking care of our mental health becomes increasingly important in such a situation. ASTA volunteers, in a continuous effort to bring positive change, has also been trying to spread awareness regarding the same with the help of our expert doctors at ASTA DM Healthcare. We hope that with this webinar, it's another step forward in the direction and that it helps you learn more about mental health and the ways that you can manage it better during these times. So, to start off today's session, I'd like to invite Ms. Jessie Paulos, Supervisor for National Agenda, UAE Social Studies and Moral Education, to deliver the welcome note.
The year 2019 faded into oblivion. A city in China, Wuhan, and the prevalent outbreak therein caught the imagination of the masses, and the world was never the same. On behalf of the principal and CEO, Mr. Srivalsan Murugan, the senior leadership and management team, the faculty and boys of our own boys, Sharjah, we extend a warm and cordial welcome to the esteemed panel of doctors. Dr. Arun Kumar, working as a specialist psychiatrist with more than 11 years of experience in the field. Dr. Sunil Raj, working as a specialist pediatrician at Aster Clinic Business Bay with more than 15 years of experience in his field, who will share valuable inputs on the theme mental health during the pandemic. Moderating the session is Ms. Riya. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jessie, for the very warm welcome. Throughout the year, we've been told to take numerous steps to maintain our physical well-being. But amidst all this hustle and bustle of our daily life, we often neglect our mental health, which is equally as important. So, to talk about mental health and the pandemic, we have Dr. Sunil Raj with us. Boasting more than 15 years of experience, Dr. Sunil Raj is a specialist pediatrician at Aster Clinics. He is not only well versed in his practice, but also has experience in teaching and training, along with an outstanding academic record from the renowned CMC Vellore. Over to you, Dr. Sunil.
Thank you, Ria and Jessie ma'am, for the introduction. And I would also like to thank the GEMS management as well as Aster volunteers for this opportunity for this interaction on this topic of extreme importance in these times. Like as Jessie ma'am briefly told, like at the beginning of this year, we welcomed this year and this onset of this new decade with a lot of hope and excitement. But unfortunately, what we have had over the last year is nothing short of a nightmare. Like all we have had, instead of all the excitement that we have had, is like nothing but worries. Like we are worried about getting sick from this disease. We are worried about our loved ones being sick from the disease, losing our loved ones. Some of us have had the disease, and many of us have had problems with our jobs, financial insecurity, nothing but insecurity. And at this point, all that we can hope for is that this time would somehow end. And the most important question in everybody's mind is, when is this going to end? And that's the commonest question which we have, but with absolutely no answers. And the only thing which we can hope for right now is that of all the statements that Donald Trump has made over the last 1 year, the one statement that he made was like it would just go away in 1 day. So even though we know it's not going to be the case, we'll just hope for the same. But what we have had with all this crisis is that we have a lot of people going through a lot of stress and mental uncertainty, insecurity, and leading on to a whole lot of mental illnesses. So if you want to look at one bright spot in this whole thing, like as parents, as teachers, as doctors, we know that children have been spared of the complications of this disease, mostly. Like we know that they have mostly no symptoms, or if at all they have symptoms, they have only mild symptoms, and they do not most of the time manifest the complications that we see in adults. So that is one good thing that we have had in this pandemic. But then, are they really healthy in this whole situation? So that's one thing we need to know. Like, if you look at the WHO definition of health, so WHO says that health is not just merely an absence of disease. It is a state of complete physical, mental, and social security. So it's not just enough that you are physically healthy, you also need to be mentally and socially healthy. So we know that our children are physically safe, but are their mental needs and their social needs being taken care of in this particular situation? So what we know right now is that unfortunately, along with the pandemic which has been raging across the world, we also have a parallel crisis. So we have all these people who are presenting to us with a lot of stress related issues, anxiety, depression, and that's been more or less like a silent pandemic. Nobody talks about these things. Like all we get is numbers related to the cases and the deaths worldwide, but nobody talks about the mental issues that we come across after the onset of the pandemic. And this is a very significant thing, but like as a pediatrician, I would like to highlight about the impact of this pandemic on children. Because if you take the worldwide numbers, if you take the WHO definition, people under the age of 19 fall under the category of children. So this is a huge population which comprises around 2.2 billion people worldwide, which is approximately 30% of the world's population. And this 30% of the world's population is basically going to be the future of the world. And as we know, this is a very vulnerable state. It's not just the physical development that occurs during this childhood phase. It is a whole mental, it is a social, emotional, and their personalities being formed in these ages. So we all know that if we have a physical injury, we'll have a scar which will persist throughout life. So what is happening with these children as an impact of all the stress that they are going through is that they are developing a scar in their mind, which is going to persist lifelong. And this creates a huge risk for them to go on to develop mental disorders later in life. So this is something which we need to address. So as parents, we are very, very worried about the physical well-being of the child. Like we do Google searches on the physical signs and symptoms of COVID and all sorts of diseases. Like we are so protective about them that like the moment they start having a cough or a cold or a slight fever, we are worried that they might be having COVID. Immediately we rush them to the pediatrician, and even for no reason we do the COVID test and all sort of things. That's because we are worried about the health of our children. We would do and to go to any possible extent to keep them healthy. But are we doing the same thing regarding their mental health, which can have an equal or even more impact on their future? So this is something that we need to think about, because even though the children are immune against the complications of COVID, they are not at all immune against the mental aspects of the disorder. So we all know that like as adults, like even with all our experiences, all the coping mechanisms that we have, it is still not easy for us to go through the stress that we are facing. So what is happening with children? So they have a fragile but a very resilient mind, fortunately, and they have a very poorly developed coping mechanism. So how are they going to cope with the stress that they are going through during this pandemic, and how can we really help them? So what I would like to highlight over the next 5 to 10 minutes is like what is causing the stress and what are the manifestations of the stress that children are actually showing when they come to us to the clinic. And after that, I'll be handing over to Dr. Arun, who is the expert in matters related to the mind. So why exactly are the children going through stress? And not just the children, like why exactly are we going through this stress? So if you want to say in a single word, the word is disruption. Like we all know that over the last 9 to 10 months, the life that we are used to has changed entirely, like 180 degrees. Like the things that we took for granted previously, we are not allowed to do anymore, basically for our own safety. Like at the beginning of this year, if somebody had told me that I would not be allowed to go out without wearing a mask, I should keep a distance of 6 feet from anybody who comes near me, I will not be allowed to go to a movie or a park or a beach whenever I want to. I will not be allowed to fly back home to visit my parents whenever I wish to. I would have just taken it as a joke, and I would have just laughed it away. But today, that is the reality that we are going through. So we have been thrown headlong into a lot of things like working from home, learning from home, things which we had not even thought about, like at the beginning of this year or probably ever in our life. Like, who would have thought that we would be spending most of our lives at home? So what is the impact that this has had on our children? Like, what is the impact that staying away from school has had on the minds of our children? Like previously, when we sit in our clinics, like last year, majority of the parents would complain that it is very difficult to wean the children away from the screens. We just want them to go out and play. But what are we doing now today? So it's like a total disruption. Now they spend 4 to 5 hours in front of the screen just for their education, for their schooling, and even after that they have their school work to be done, and even for the recreation, because they are not allowed to move out freely for their play activities. They still have to depend on the screens. So that is one thing. Previously, like the children are used to their parents being at work throughout the day, but now they are at home, the children are at home, and the parents are also at home, and they don't know how to cope with it, because they are under constant supervision of the parents. They always feel that the parents are always on top of their heads, so that is something which causes additional stress to them. Like previously, when we were stressed, like what would we do? Like we would go out for a walk, we would go out for a movie, we would go to the beach, we will visit our friends, we will visit our parents. So all these things, or majority of these things, are forbidden right now, again for our own safety. So all these are stressors which has got a huge impact on the mind of the children as well as on the adults. So this is something which has created a huge epidemic of basically anxiety, stress, as well as leading on to even serious conditions like depression. And on top of this, like there is a lot of insecurity related to our job, our financial security, pay cuts, whatever it is. And this basically causes a lot of fear in the mind of the adults. So children basically, they look at the parents for support, and they see a lot of fear in the parents, and unfortunately fear is something which is very contagious. So when they see their parents being stressed out, who are their role models, so they also tend to go through the same sort of feelings. And these feelings, like if adults have a stress, they know when to get help most of the time. Like they know how to express to their peers, their friends, their spouses that I'm going through this. But children, do they know how to express all these things? They do not. So it is very important for us that that we know as adults and parents as well as teachers, how exactly do we identify a child who is going through a stressful situation. So these symptoms are not like as straightforward as even the signs of a COVID, when you would have a fever, cough, and a running nose and a sore throat. So they can have various manifestations, and it can vary across different age groups as well. So it is very difficult for us to identify those. So if you think that it is only the older children who will be like having the manifestations of all these things, because younger children, they may not know much about the disease, then we cannot be wrong at all. Like we cannot be even more wrong, because like we know that like even for an unborn child, like if the mother goes through a lot of stress during pregnancy, that child can have varied manifestations in both his physical as well as mental growth, which can cause effects throughout the life, that is even in an unborn child. But what about an infant? An infant, like a child who is under the age of 1, he knows nothing about corona. He knows nothing about what is happening around him or the numbers. So what is the manifestation on him? Like they too have manifestations, because infants basically, they sense the behavior pattern or changes in the parents. So if you are stressed out, and if that is manifesting in your behavior, the infants have a tendency to grasp your response, and they will show symptoms accordingly. And what about preschool children and toddlers? Do they show any symptoms? They can also, because they are a bundle of energy. They want to run around, they want to explore things, but now they are being kept indoors. they need to be confined and isolated, which they cannot understand. So how do they show out their frustration? They start getting very irritable, they start getting very demand, they tend to get sort of clinging on to the parents all the time, they refuse feeds. So all these are signs of stress related behavior in toddlers. And what about school going children, or children in the ages of 4 to 7? So that's a very important age group, because that's a time when they have a lot of separation anxiety. So they have a fear of being separated from their parents, and they know a little bit about the virus and all those things, much more than what we might think about. And they will have a fear that their parents, their grandparents may get the disease and something might happen to them. And that is also a time when they have a state called as a magical thinking. So what they think is like, if I do something wrong, my parents also might have some bad things happening to them because of my behavior, which can even cause a sense of guilt in them. So, and these children, they also don't know how to express to you how, whether they are having stress or not. So what we see in them is basically a change in their behavior pattern. So basically they become more fussy, they become more angry, they start showing more temper tantrums, they refuse feeds, and importantly they may also show some regressive behaviors. Regressive behaviors means like a child who was previously weaned away from the bottle might start demanding for the bottle even more. He might start thumb sucking. A child who was previously weaned away, was toilet trained, might start getting accidents. He might refuse feeds. Like all sort of frustrated behavior could be signs of stress in a school going child. And what about the most important time period, that is adolescents and teenagers? So we all know that, like for a fact, like even before COVID, 50% of all mental disorders basically start showing symptoms during the teenage period. So this is a very important age group where they have where they depend on the support of the peers as well as the teachers, as much as the support of the parents. So they are also a bundle of energy. They want to go out, they want to spend time with their peers, they want to explore things, but they are now being confined to their homes and confined to their screens. And now we even have a new terminology coming called as a Zoom fatigue, because older children, they might need to spend more time in front of the screen because of their school demands and curriculum demands. And they also start getting frustrated, they start showing decrease in interest in their studies, anxiety, anorexia, they don't want to eat much, they start showing sleep disturbances. So these are the various things that we are seeing in our clinics these days. And on top of this, we have a huge number of children, that is like across all age groups, who are coming to us with a lot of aches and pains. They just keep complaining of headache, they complain of chest pain, they complain of abdominal pain. Like we examine them from top to bottom, we evaluate from them for everything, but they absolutely have no organic cause. So these are basically what we call as functional symptoms. So it is not that they are faking these symptoms, they actually feel this pain, but it is not because they have something wrong with their body, it is all related to the mind. So I'll just hand over to Dr. Arun to speak in a little bit in detail about identifying and addressing all these stresses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sunil. As adults, of course, this is a challenging time, but it might be doubly true for children who might undergo these struggles much more silently, like Dr. Sunil mentioned. So to talk more about child's mental health, we have with us Dr. Arun Kumar. Dr. Arun Kumar is a specialist psychiatrist at Aster Hospitals with over 11 years of experience in the field. An alumni of the prestigious institute JIPMA, he has also served the government of Kerala's district mental health program. Dr. Kumar, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Am I audible? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you all for having me here today. Now, Dr. Sunil has explained many of the things, and I just have to fill in the few blanks he has left for me to fill. So with the paucity of time, we cannot discuss everything in detail. So whatever is possible, I'll just give you a brief introduction or a brief overview of the things. Now, if you look at the net, the fear regarding COVID and the direct effects of COVID are taking a
slightly back a stance. Like now, many other things have come to the forefront. Now, the importance of mental health has become very, very important nowadays, and many institutes, countries have started discussing this in detail. So to begin with, we need to understand that the stigma associated with mental illness or with psychiatry or the mental health issues has started fading away. Earlier, it used to be a dreaded field. Like people used to think that going to a psychiatrist means that one is crazy or something is wrong with them. I think that attitude has begun to change, but not fully changed. Now, many a times when children say that they are upset or they need to meet someone for counseling, many times parents are in denial. So parents, most often I see, they first say that he has no reason to be sad. He has no reason to be anxious. We give him everything. So what I feel is education is important. Both the parents and the teachers and the students need to know what mental health issues are and what has to be done regarding this if there is a problem. Now, as Dr. Sunil rightly said, the mental health issues that we see even in adulthood, more than 50% of the cases have had onset in the preteens. Like by the age of 14 to 15, more than 50% have already started showing some symptoms or some problems related to mental health issues. Now, of late, one was the direct influence of COVID, and the second part is the after effects of COVID, or rather the side effects of the lockdown and having had to stay at home for a long time. So what has precipitated is one, children, they love routines. If they have a schedule, they go like clockwork. Now what COVID has done is it has broken the schedule, it has broken the school time, it has basically broken that programming nature of a particular day. So that has affected them. And now most of the children, they spend most of the time in closed rooms, and imagine that they've had issues within people in the family, say with their siblings or with their parents. They're forced to see them all through the day 24/7, and that has precipitated many mental health issues. So you'll come across many YouTube videos and net articles on mental health issues, and many of the times parents are confused as what has to be done, what is wrong with my child. They might see many videos on anger management in children, behavioral issues in children, but they sometimes find that it doesn't work for their child. What we need to understand is each child is unique. We cannot compare our children with the neighbors or with other students in the class. So we need to give importance to the uniqueness of each child. So for this, I would like to bring certain facts to the forefront. Now, certain things that all parents must know, including all teachers. Now, we are basically what our brains are. Now, people think that you're what you think you are, but more than that, it's actually the brains. Me talking to you, you listening to me, you comprehending what I'm telling, and you registering it. So our brain development is a continuous process. So when we are born, there are more than 3 trillion neurons in the infant brain. Now, as we grow up, the unwanted neural connections start being plucked away. It's called pruning, right? And the things that we keep stimulating keeps growing. So this brain, when I mean, it doesn't mean just the intelligence or the intellect. It also means our emotional growing, our social growing, etc. So what a child learns from the environment, like what it learns from its parents, from its caregivers, if it is a healthy thing, it will stay on forever. So if a child has shown some behavioral problems during the last few months, it is not just because of the last few months. It has been something which has been going on in the child for a very long time, and it got precipitated because of this current stress. So this is what we call as the nature and the nurture. Nature is like what we are born with, our genetics, certain traits from our parents, from our grandparents. And nurture is the ongoing environmental and social process which brings about the growth part. So which brings about a personality when we become adults, or in children we call it as a temperament. So there are various types of children, and under stress, each child shows a different behavior. So that we need to understand. Now this nurture, when we talk, everything is not bad. There are certain things called as risk factors, which make them more prone to get mental health issues, and there are certain protective factors. Now the risk factors would be like a biological thing, like that they have had a family history of someone with a depression or anxiety disorder, then these children are more prone to get it. Then child with pre-existing anxiety, like some children are generally fearful of crowds, fearful of many things. So their anxiety increases during these unpredictable times. Then there are children with special needs, there are children with brain disorders, epilepsy. These are the children who have high risk for developing mental health issues. So these are some of the biological factors. There are also other factors like within the family, the social factors like a broken family or conflicts between the parents, or some history of abuse within the household, or poor relationship with siblings, or bullying at school, poor relationship with friends and with the teachers. All these can be risk factors for them to develop mental health issues. There are certain other protective factors like a very well-knit close family where there is easy communication and where the child is being heard of, and the child has various rings of protection like the first ring, the second ring, and child is in a very safe and secure environment. These are definitely protective factors. Now, an important thing is regarding the mental health of the parents and the teachers. Now, many times the mother brings the child saying that the child is very anxious, the child is very afraid of COVID, the child keeps washing his hands very frequently and all. When you evaluate the child, you find that the mother is more anxious than the child. So it is that mother's anxiety which is mirrored onto the child. So the parents, how they handle this stress, their mental health issues also matters. Now, for example, recently I had a family who had come to visit me in the clinic. The mother had presented with frequent attacks of anxiety, what we call a panic attack or panic disorder. They have been to multiple cardiologists. All results were normal. So when we explored, we found that she has two children, a 13-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy. Now, what is happening in the house is nothing less than a world war, right? The younger boy keeps on disturbing the girl, and the girl wants some privacy because of her age. She wants to be left alone with her friends and with her sister. So she gets angry. She doesn't talk to anyone at the house. She goes and closes herself inside the room or inside the bathroom. The guy gets angry. He breaks things. He throws tantrums and all. So within a same family, see how everyone gets affected because of each other. Now, this is how children present at times. They don't come to us and say that they're feeling sad or depressed. They might show certain symptoms. So what we call as externalizing or internalizing symptoms. Externalizing is when they outwardly show things, like they weep all the time, like throwing tantrums and getting violent, not obeying parents and doing exactly the opposite, getting aggressive, being very irritable. Or they can be like self-absorbed. They do not talk much. They keep crying. So it is important that we need to know what are the most common symptoms that occur in children. So the most common disorder that we see in children is depression. They talk less. They are not interested in the things which they used to be interested in. They have tiredness all the time. All through the day they feel tired. Attending class they feel tired. They don't have the interest or the motivation to do anything because of tiredness. Changes in their eating habits. Some people, they refuse to eat. Some children, they eat a lot. It's called stress eating. They binge on whatever they get. Changes in the sleep patterns, late onset of sleep, getting up late, feeling drowsy all through the time. All these could be the signs of depression. And if it becomes severe, they start crying for no reason. They say that life is not worthless. And at times even children say that they attempt to harm themselves or say that life is not worth living, it is better to die. So we need to be aware of these symptoms. And some children, their anxiety is very common. They become very fearful of everything. They're very scared. They're always on the edge. They fear their exams. They fear going back to school. So these are the common symptoms. And many times children find difficulty in concentrating in their studies, getting poor in academics, spending more time on digital media and all. This could be part of attention deficit disorder, or they might be having pre-existing attention conditions like which has worsened over the time. Now, bringing to the subject of like the digital addiction, which is very, very common now. Earlier, prior to this year, the WHO had recommendations for ideal screen time for children. And if you actually see the guidelines, it's just 1 to 2 hours even for the school age. And right now what we see is they spend more than 7 to 8 hours on the screen just because they have to attend the classes, which is inevitable. But what we can try to do is like cut on the other on-screen activity times. So these are the few signs how we have to identify the disturbances in children. Now, what we can actually do is, most of the time, we do something called as a reactive treatment. Like once something happens, we try to manage it. And now is the time when parents and teachers have to be little open about seeking help. Now, within school was one of the best places of defense for all these mental health issues, because at least peers find out that something is wrong with their friends, or the teachers find out something is wrong. Now that is not there, what is advisable is within home something can be done, and at the school level also something can be done. Within the home, parents definitely need to spend a lot of time with the children, They need to have certain open communication, non-judgmental listening. We actually need to teach children to express their emotions, to tell them when they're sad, to tell them when they're mad or angry, to teach them to tell them when they're scared. And even parents can actually teach them saying that, I'm very angry right now, please don't talk to me. We should encourage the children to express their emotions. So that is an exercise. It's a little difficult to achieve, but it is not impossible. So children have to be taught that, so that any time they feel not so right, they have the freedom to go and tell their parents how they feel. Now, if the issue is within the family, they cannot discuss with anyone in the family. So we need to have the second circle of defense, which mostly consists of the teachers and their trusted friends. Now, children sometimes they do not feel confident in telling things to elderly people. They're more comfortable with same age group. So that's when we need to have peer groups. Like there are many mental health programs where a few students from the classes they are trained and to identify few of these symptoms, and multiple groups are formed, and these groups interact with each other discussing their problems, and they are headed by one teacher or a counselor, someone who gives them guidance. So in that way they have a small support system. Now teachers, what they need to be careful about is they also have to be a patient listener, and they have to ensure confidentiality. Many times children do not tell teachers because they fear that whatever is discussed with the teacher gets discussed in the staff room, because many a times some other teacher come and ask them how are you today, so they obviously think that the teacher has discussed with someone. So these are few issues which can be handled if looked upon too properly. And yeah, to wind up, at home a few things can be done to teach the children the right way to behave, because children learn from the reward they get out of a behavior. If they do something bad, and if it is ignored and neglected and no one reacts to it, they continue doing that bad, thinking that is the right thing. So we need to reward good behavior, and we need to contain or stop and arrest wrong behaviors. That's one thing which can be done at home and school. And parents and teachers, they need to take care of their stress levels, see to that it doesn't affect the way they look at children or it affects the children's behavior. And I feel these are the few points that I wanted to discuss today. And it is impossible to cover everything. So if you had left out anything, I think we are open to questions, and we'll discuss during the question answer session. Thank you.
We will now be having a question answer session. So if you have any questions you want to ask, please feel free to type it down in the live chat. So our first question is, during this pandemic, we might have a lot of colleagues or friends who have shut themselves out and have stopped communicating with others. So is there any tips that you recommend that we can do to help them?
Okay, I'll take it, I think. Now, we have to understand the behavior with reference to the context. Now, who this person is, were they pre-morbidly like this, were they always like this? Now, all these children, they will have some close friends or some close associate. So if we cannot directly approach the person who's affected, we can approach them through the person whom they trust. And that has to be done. We should not wait for them to come and reach us out. We need to reach them out if we feel that they are in distress. So that is number one. And number two is through these close friends, some open communication. They should be willing to listen to the other person. And it needn't be a direct person-to-person interaction. Now that we have so many communication channels, it can be through that. And sometimes children do feel a little easy communicating via text or writing things. So that is another way of communicating. But we shouldn't leave them because they are a type who doesn't mingle much. But we need to reach them out and do as much help as we can.
Thank you so much for that answer, Doctor. Our next question comes from Khush Seth, who asks, how do you mentally deal with the disturbing information that is coming in? Dr. Sunil, if you'd like to answer.
Yeah, that is one of the main problems that we are facing right now, because there is like an overload of information coming through like our digital media as well as the mainstream media. Like previously, if you remember, like before the onset of the pandemic, like when you watch the news channels or even the entertainment channels, when you have a cricket match or a football match going on, you'll have a small box at the bottom which shows the live scores. But now, instead of the scores, we have the number of COVID patients worldwide and the number of people who are dying worldwide. So it's like a lot of negative information which is coming out through the media. So it is very important that we regulate this exposure, like especially for the children, because the more negative information that they get, like it's not that everything is negative, like the media does give us a lot of information to stay away from the pandemic, to stay safe. All the regulations that the government puts out, that the WHO puts out, a lot of information do we get that is positive. But when we look at all those, there are some media which makes things very sensational for publicity and all those things. So it is important that we screen whatever children are actually allowed to watch. So I mean, it's very important that we keep them being overexposed to all this routine media. They should have some exposure, but it should be limited, and it should be screened, whatever is just to keep them away from all the tabloid media. Mainstream media in moderation is fine, and at the end of that always have a discussion, what you understood from what you heard, and if they have any doubts regarding or any fear regarding that, that should be clarified. So that is one of the most important things that would help in alleviating some of the stress that can be added up because of this overexposure.
Thank you so much for the answer, Doctor. Our next question comes from Alfaz Anzar, who asks, how can students maintain a healthy routine in this pandemic? Since Dr. Kumar spoke a bit about it, I'll ask him to take the question.
Yeah, as I said, the break-in routine was one of the most important predisposing factor to all the things that we discussed earlier. But routine is something which we can have in any environment. And now, given the situations now, I think it's holidays or the vacations have started, we can have routines even during vacations. Now, a tip for students is, you know what is best for you. You know which is the time that suits you the best. Now, if you can't do it yourself, take help from your parents or friends. But ideally, you need to keep certain times fixed. So we have a biological clock or a biological rhythm. So have a routine which matches it. For example, you can have your meal times fixed for the breakfast, the lunch and the dinner, which had been fixed earlier even during your school times. You can have the similar timings even now. And another important aspect is to have your sleeping time fixed. It is difficult for us to calculate when we go to sleep, but we can always decide when we are going to wake up. So always have a regular wake up time. You can fix it for yourself. It can be 6:30, 7 or 7:30. But see to that you wake up at that particular time every morning and try to avoid daytime naps. If at all you take a daytime nap, let it be timed, say 15 minutes, 20 or 30 minutes. Now when you start waking up one particular time every day, automatically your sleep onset will adjust accordingly. So you have a proper sleep cycle, sleep rhythm, and you'll have a time for your meals. So the in between times you can plan for whatever activities you decide to do. If you had online class, it was for the classes. Otherwise, you'll need to have a time for your play. You need to be allotted for your physical activities, which is equally important as your mental health. You need at least 30 minutes of active, rigorous training, which can be just running around, playing badminton, whatever it is, whatever your environment permits you to do during these COVID times. So have these times fixed, have some time for academics, have some time for leisure. And yesterday I had a child who said that it's easy to make a timetable but very difficult to follow it. I understand. But that is what a timetable is. Unlike in school where they give you a very fixed timing, when you make your own routines, you can modify it. If you find that after 2-3 days it is not working out, change it. Have another timetable which suits your routines. And finally, I'm sure that you'll come across a particular routine which you are happy with. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer, Doctor. That was some great advice. Our next question is from Arjun Bomma, who asks, Sir, how to focus or concentrate on whatever work we are doing?
Yeah, that's again related to the routines I was saying. So once you know that you have a routine, like you're given that reading time only for 1 hour, and after that you have to go for play for half an hour, there is some a scheme of things that you need to do. So that is one thing. Having a routine helps you stay focused on the task that you have at hand. And there are many other exercises, training exercises which you can do for improving your attention. Now, it is difficult for a human brain to focus more than 40 to 45 minutes on any one particular act. So that if you're beginning to read a particular thing, plan it accordingly so that you have a small break after every 45 minutes or 30 minutes. It depends on individuals. Okay, take that voluntary break, go refresh yourself and come back. But see to it that that break doesn't include going to social media, watching TV, or listening to music, because you can never stick to your break time using these things. And I mean, your break might go on and you might forget where you started. So an important thing is know yourself, your limits, have enough breaks, and you'll have to do certain other techniques. It's called mindful techniques. I think time doesn't permit it, but there are certain techniques which you can do to improve your concentration. Thank you.
Thank you so much once again for the answer. I think we have time for one more question. It's important to know when you need to seek help in this situation. So, are there any warning signs that students can look out for to know that, okay, I need to seek mental help?
Yes. So, as discussed a little while back, if you feel that you're not yourself, that there are some changes in your mood, some changes in your behavior, you're getting more irritable than usual, you're not able to focus on the work than usual, then you know that something is wrong with you. And if this wrongness starts affecting your activities, like start affecting your studies, start affecting your interpersonal relationship with parents, with your siblings, with your friends, and with your teachers, then you know that it is better to seek help. And seeking help doesn't mean that you have a weak mind, or it doesn't mean that you are a failure in managing things. It just means that you need to learn certain new strategies to cope with that particular stress. So it is always better to seek help at this stage rather than get totally affected by it and then get treated. So you can ask your first line of defense, like your parents or your teachers, or you can always seek professional help from counselors, psychologists, and psychiatrists. And this is a note for the parents and teachers. Meeting a psychiatrist doesn't mean that the children will get drugged, they'll be put to sleep, or they'll be made weak or tired, or they'll have to depend on drugs for their entire lifetime. No, science has changed. Everything is scientific, evidence based. So feel free to contact professionals for help.
Thank you once again, Doctor. I'm sure this was very informative and our listeners learnt a lot. Now, to wind up, we have Mr. Srivalsan Murugan, the Principal and CEO of our own English High School, Sharjah, to deliver a few words.
Dr. Sunil, Dr. Arun, thank you so much for your valuable inputs. I would like to thank Ms. Shamita here, my colleague, who has been instrumental in making sure that this session happens. It's been a wonderful session. I've been listening to these professionals speaking. And I had taken my own notes. Thank you for clarifying stuff like Zoom fatigue. We all feel that it's a new word. I think it needs to be taken up in its best sense possible. Doctor talked about routines being disrupted. So I think as a corollary to that, I think we must think in terms of rebuilding routines that would work in a pandemic situation when you are at home. Thank you for bringing to our attention that each child is unique. This is reiteration of our own belief, but in our world, what sometimes we tend as adults to overlook that our children are unique. We tend to compare, and we try to start off with one size fits all approach, which is not good at all. But thank you for bringing that to our attention. I was fascinated by rings of protection analysis, and this is something that I go back to a time when I was part of a joint family system, and we had rings of protection around us in the form of grandfather, grandmother, immediate cousins, extended families, etc., 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 which are now on the wane, but we need to substitute that both in school as well as at homes. Okay. Thank you for bringing to our notice that we got to listen to children without any sense of judgment, non-judgmental listening. I think that is a very, very important thing as far as I'm concerned, as far as I see it, because we, even as a boy or a girl speaks to us, both as parent as well as as teachers, we tend to kind of become judgmental, which takes away the confidentiality and takes away the credibility of the person that is listening. Okay, I am so very grateful to you both, Dr. Sunil and Dr. Arun, for this session. I saw the brilliant questions that are emanating from a variety of people. I can only tell you that none of us are favorably placed in this situation. We are all learning from this situation. We are learning to cope, and by being absolutely open, transparent, and empathetic to all that are under our care, we should be able to do better. We will be able to overcome the pandemic. And as someone said, May 2021 become the harbinger of a new time, the post-pandemic time. Thank you once again for having us over here. Thank you for addressing our students and our parents. Thank you. You're on mute, Ria.
Thank you so much once again, Mr. Srinivasan, for your words. Now to wind up, I asked Dr. Sumaya Kazi, the school doctor at our own English High School, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good morning, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for today's webinar arranged by the Aster volunteer team, Shamita, and also our webinar speaker, Dr. Arun Kamal and Dr. Sunil Raj, who enlightened us with their knowledge. You gave us a deep insight into the topic and revealed some interesting facts. The information in this webinar was fascinating and timely. I would also like to thank our principal and CEO, Mr. Srivalsan sir, for giving us the permission to organize this webinar. I hope that the Aster team has also enjoyed meeting with the OOB family. Thank you to all parents, staff, and students who are present here and for taking the time to listen to us. I'm so grateful for the opportunity. Thank you all and have a nice day.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, doctors.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you all for having
Thank you,
us.
sir.
That's all we have for today. I hope you all had a great time listening in and that you learnt a lot. If you'd like to revisit any of the advice that our doctors have shared, we will be re-uploading this onto all our social media pages, so don't forget to follow us there. And of course, if you would like to support Aster Volunteers or register yourself as a volunteer, feel free to visit astervolunteers.com. Thank you, stay safe and have a nice day.